Well, hi there, everyone. Good evening and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. And no, it's not Frog Monster, it's Prog Monster. Anyways, we're here to do an episode of What's New, show I do every Saturday night in which I pick an album that's come out in 2025 and I kind of go over it, review it, talk about it a bit. And I picked one today that I absolutely think is beautiful. I think this is a fantastic, wonderful album. And I would say it has the early lead as being my favorite album of the year. So the album we're doing today, I was going to use the prop, but the prop hasn't showed, but I still want to do it anyways. I've listened to it a couple times now. IQ's Dominion, released on March the 28th, so just yesterday. It's about 53 minutes, a little more than 53 minutes in length on the Giant Electric P progressive rock label. This album featuring the members of IQ, Peter Nichols, lead vocals, Mike Holmes on guitars, Tim Isu or Esau, I think it is actually, on bass, Neil Durant on keyboards, and Paul Cook on the drums. So, without further ado, there's only 5 tracks on the album, but the first one is Epic Side. It's an epic length song, almost 22 minutes in length. A beautiful song, pretty typical of IQ to my ear anyways. Sounds it, lots of epic keyboard parts, lots of epic vocal parts by Peter Nichols, some excellent drum fills by Paul Cook as well. So the overall feel of this album is very epic in nature, feels epic. It's a little bit slower than some of their stuff in the past, but definitely not out of sync with anything they've done. It's got some parts that are kind of heavier, some parts that are kind of quiet. I think Peter Nichols' voice is very strong on this album, having that low kind of quiet, somber voice that he does, and also doing that really high-end voice that's so smooth that he also does. This is the guy's vocals who I did not like the first time I heard him, and now I absolutely adore him. There's some great guitar on the album, but I think the drums and the keyboard and the synthesizer parts dominate the album pretty strongly. So we'll go over each of the little tracks. I did give each of the songs a ranking. I will give you the ranking amount for this album because it's so good. So the first song, The Unknown Door, the opening track, 22 minutes plus, straight out with this kind of orchestratal part that you'll actually hear. There's a little bit of a horn sound in there too, right at the beginning of this album that kind of lasts for a few minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long. There's some computer radio noises with a kind of a wartime narrative going on. So obviously the song is leading into a kind of World War II kind of feeling to it. Some synthesizer organ part that kind of takes over that a little bit. And then you've got Peter's voice or vocals are very clear on this song, as it is on pretty much the whole album. Builds some great drum fills throughout this track. And Paul's right on spot throughout the whole album, to be really honest with you. I really like his drumming style. An excellent drummer. It's got a bit of a catchy melody. Probably gets a little bit heavier as the track goes along, but it's definitely dominated by the keyboards throughout the track. And towards the end or the middle of the album, there's a little bit of, I think it sounds like a mellotron to me. It sounds great. And I think that towards the middle of the album, Peter's voice starts to become more dominant as I've come to know his voice to sound. there's a little bit of an acoustic part that kind of reminds me of, it's somewhere towards the second half. I don't know if it's just past the second half or maybe a little further. There's this acoustic guitar part that comes in. It reminds me, immediately got a flashback to the song from the part in Dogs by Pink Floyd on the Animals album. Yeah, it definitely has that feel right there. That's the only part of the whole album where I get a feel of something from another band, and that's just in a little bit of an acoustic part. Great tune. The second tune, oh yeah, I gave that song an 8.5. Just think it was fantastic. The next tune out, also like this tune, One of Us. I didn't give it as high a ranking. I'm not sure why. Maybe this is a little bit too short. It's only about 3:10 long. Opens with a nice acoustic guitar part, a little classical bit in there, I think. Vocals were more subdued, and his voice is a little bit more husky sounding here. The organ and synthesizer, very atmospheric on this song, capturing that grandiose feeling that they're known for doing. But it's a very mellow, almost a ballad-like mellow type song. I wouldn't call this even close to a ballad, but it's in that range that you might find ballads in. It's kind of a soft sound, I would say, overall. So great tune. I gave this one only a 7. Not sure why. Maybe because it was a little on the softer side. I tend to like my stuff by these guys a little heavier. Next up is No Dominion. The song's about 6.5 minutes in length. Opens with a kind of a synthesizer, almost a spacey feeling to it. Excuse me. Then a heavier part that's more dominated by the keyboards, the synthesizers, and the drums being very dominant in this part. Keyboard solo is very specific sounding. It's got a kind of almost an organ sound to it, I guess, maybe. Very symphonic, of course. This track, very symphonic, one of the more symphonic tracks on the album. It's got a grand scale of instrumentality on here. There's lots of stuff going on, complex stuff that you've come to know from this band. If you get to hear them, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So this one I gave a 7.5. Now the back two tracks, which I think were, well, the next track I think is probably my favorite. I rarely give anything over an 8 or 8.5. I gave this one a 9. That's how good I think it is. It opens with a doorbell-like sound. I don't know how to call it anything else. That's what it sounds like to me. The vocals are a little bit more subdued in the opening. And a small bit that kind of goes on for a little bit. It's not overly dominant, but it's in the beginning of the song. So then you've got this kind of chimey-like synthesizer that used to create a kind of a sullen feeling to the song. So it's, a little bit darker, I guess is maybe what I want to call it. The drums and the guitar build up, and the bass jumps in there, and the song builds up as we go along. Keyboard, guitar create a much heavier sound as the song builds. Almost an epic proportions too. It continues to build and then drops to this kind of piano synthesizer part to kind of tail out the song. It's a magnificent song. It's well crafted, well put together, if you want, whatever you want to call it. Has some epic sounds at different parts of the song, and really just gripped me when I heard it. So that's why I gave it a 9. I think this is absolutely a killer IQ song. Kind of brings me back to Dark Matter, and there's a couple tracks on Dark Matter absolutely killer. This one I think would fit on there very easily. And then we have the final track on the album, Neverland. This one's, oh, by the way, Far From Here is about 12, almost 13 minutes long. So it's a fairly lengthy tune. The next track is about 8, a little over 8 minutes long. Another kind of epic-like song, Neverland. Symphonic synthesizer part to start this track off. Then it kind of builds. using the keys and the drums to create a much bigger sound as the song comes along. I think this is probably the most emotional track on the album. I found it very emotional. Peter's vocals are strongest at their high end pitch here. Maybe that's what brings the emotions out. I suspect that it probably is. The guitar solo on the song is very strong. You don't get a lot of guitar solos with these guys. Primarily, they use more keyboard dominated stuff than guitar, but there's a guitar solo here I think is pretty good. It's not exceptionally long, it's just a little bit, but it's still really good. And then it finished with this quiet, kind of solemn part towards the end to close the song out. So there's quite a bit of that on the album. So you've got these epic scale parts with some quiet parts to kind of end songs or begin songs or break up the heavy parts during the track. And to me, it's a very typical IQ album, very strong. I don't know if it'll be their best album. It's definitely my favorite current album of this year. Whether it stays in that position or not, it's hard to say. Hopefully when I get it, we'll see. It'll probably go into my playlist almost immediately when an opportunity comes to put it in. So yeah, epic album. Loved it. Loved everything about it. Highly recommended if you like IQ or if you like that early Marillion or if you like some of like Pendragon, a few bands like that from the neo-prog era of rock that started in the early 80s, early to mid 80s actually. You will absolutely love this, and you know who you are anyways. You're going to love this. Most people who like this band, who have heard this band and have been listening to this band, have been excited to hear this album and to get to own it. I'm sure most people have already ordered it. I ordered it recently. I couldn't get in on the early one at Laser CD, so I had to go elsewhere. But either way, fantastic album. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of What's New, featuring Dominion from IQ, and we will be back next week with another new What's New album. That will be another neo-prog band, Solstice, which will be coming out with their new album. So I hope to see you all. Please hit the like and subscribe. If you want to make any comments about the IQ album, you may do so in the comment section below. And we will see you next week on What's New. So take care and have a good night and goodbye.